Chapter 14, the Respiratory System. The process of cellular respiration requires oxygen along with glucose to yield sufficient ATP, which is the energy source required for the body. The respiratory system provides the body with this essential oxygen as well as disposes of the cellular respiration byproduct of carbon dioxide. This exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide regulates the acidity of body fluids. When carbon dioxide dissolves in water or other body fluids, it forms carbonic acid, which is harmful to the body cells. There's 4 processes that play a part in respiration. Breathing, or also referred to as ventilation, brings oxygen into lungs and moves carbon dioxide out of the lungs. External respiration is the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide between the blood and the lungs. Gas transport is the transport of oxygen and carbon dioxide between the cells and the lungs. And internal respiration is the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide between the blood and the cells occurring in the capillaries. And this image just shows the processes we just talked about. Breathing or ventilation moves air in and out of the lungs. External respiration is the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide between the lungs and the blood. Gas transport moves this oxygen and carbon dioxide between the lungs and the body tissues. And internal respiration is the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide between blood and the body tissues and cells. The nose has a nasal septum dividing the inside into 2 nasal cavities. It contains 3 bones that increase the surface area within. It is covered inside with mucous membranes, a mucous membrane near the inner surface. The functions of the nose in the respiratory system is that it cleans incoming air. It has nasal-like hairs and mucus. It warms and moistens the air before reaching the delicate lung tissue, and when exhaling, it helps to maintain moisture and warmth not lost to the atmosphere. As well, of course, it contains the sensory for smell. The olfactory receptors are located on the mucous membranes. Sinuses are large-filled air spaces in the bones of the face and also connect to the nasal cavities. Functions of the sinuses is to lighten the head. They also help to warm and moisten air because they also are filled with mucous membranes, and as well as act as part of the resonating chamber that affects speech. Sinusitis is an inflammation of the mucous membranes of the sinuses that prevents sinus drainage and cause pain and pressure in the facial region. The pressure is caused by fluid accumulation, which can cause pain over one or possibly both eyes. Pain may even exist in the cheek, or may result, sinusitis may even result from a cold virus. Treatment usually entails taking a decongestant to reduce the swelling and allow for proper drainage. The pharynx is the space located between the nose and the throat, and is a common passageway for food, drink, and air. It's connected to the middle ear via the eustachian tube, and recall that the eustachian tube helps to equalize pressure in the middle ear, such as when you're changing altitude in a planes. The larynx, or also the voice box, is primarily made of cartilage and serves as the selective entrance to the lower respiratory system. It allows air but no other materials to enter the lower respiratory system, and as well as being the source of the voice. Talks about the larynx as a selective entrance to the lower respiratory system. During swallowing, the larynx raises up and causes the epiglottis, which is a flap of cartilage, to cover the glottis, which the glottis is the opening through which air passes through to the trachea. If this mechanism should fail and food or drink accidentally enter the trachea, then coughing may expel the material. And the Heimlich maneuver, of course, is the process for trying to dislodge. This takes through the processes of the Heimlich maneuver of standing behind the individual, placing your fist and thumb beneath the victim's rib cage, grasping the fist with the other hand and delivering a rapid upward movement, trying to force air to dislodge what is lodged in the trachea. One of the most important aspects, should this happen, is many times individuals get embarrassed. You do not ever want to leave an area where help is available. This too also shows on an adult there are different processes for an infant. The larynx as the source of the voice. Vocal cords, which are strands of tissue stretched over the glottis, vibrate and produce the voice. The tension of the vocal cords determines the pitch, such as if they're stretched and thin cords are going to be a higher pitch. Laryngitis is the inflammation of the larynx. The vocal cords become swollen and thick, causing the voice to deepen, so they cannot vibrate freely. Thus the voice will deepen. Highly inflamed may lose the ability to speak completely. This shows the image of the process. It shows you your glottis at the top. The epiglottis is open during breathing, but covers the opening to the larynx during swallowing, during food, drink, to prevent food from entering the trachea. And so you see the larynx, the glottis is the opening, shows you your vocal cords. Talks about during quiet breathing, the vocal cords are near the sides of the larynx and the glottis is open. During speech, the vocal cords are stretched over the glottis and vibrate as air passes through them, producing sound. And the vocal cords are just the folds, the connective tissue. The trachea or windpipe is held by C-shaped rings of cartilage and function to conduct air between the environment and the lungs. The open ends of the rings face the side of the trachea next to the esophagus. This placement allows the esophagus to expand and compress the trachea when a large mass of food is swallowed. Cartilage rings are necessary to prevent the airways from collapsing during each breath, when the rapid flow of air during breathing would collapse them. The bronchial tree is just a network of progressively smaller air tubes. The cartilage amount within them varies with structure, diameter. The trachea divides into two air tubes called the primary bronchi, each of which leads to one of the lungs. The bronchi branch repeatedly within each lung, eventually forming bronchioles. Bronchioles terminate in the alveoli, the air sacs, where air exchange is actually going to occur. The bronchi are held by cartilage. The amount, as I said earlier, decreases as the tubes get smaller. Bronchioles lack cartilage and have smooth muscle for constriction. Asthma is spasms of the bronchial muscles that severely restrict airflow. It's characterized by reoccurring attacks. It's a chronic condition. Symptoms include wheezing and difficulty breathing and persistent inflammation of the airways. Treatment includes inhalants that relax the bronchial muscles, reduce inflammation of the air tubules containing steroids. Asthma is often caused by allergens such as pollen, animal dander, or even dust mites. Can also result from colds, respiratory infections, some drugs, or inhaling irritating substances. The alveoli is a minute, thin-walled, rounded chamber surrounded by a vast network of capillaries. This is where oxygen will diffuse from the inhaled air into the blood, and also where the carbon dioxide will diffuse from the blood into the alveolar air to be exhaled from the body. Each lung contains approximately 300 million alveoli, and this, because there are so many, this increases the surface area of the lung about 8,500 times. Surfactant is a phospholipid molecule that coats the alveoli and keep them open. The moist membranes of the alveoli are attracted to one another because of the attraction between water molecules called surface tension. Surfactant disrupts the attraction and thus keep the alveoli from collapsing. Respiratory distress syndrome, RDS, occurs in some premature babies due to insufficient production of surfactant, causing the walls of the alveoli to stick together. Surfactant production in infants begins in about the 8th month to ensure enough surfactant is present upon birth when the first breath is taken. Treatment, if the infant is born prematurely, the treatment, mechanical respirators, as well as they have artificial surfactant that can be given to premature children. And so this just shows an example of the alveoli, the small filled sac in the lung where this exchange is going to occur. And so in B you can see the capillaries covering one alveoli, allowing for this exchange to occur of the oxygen and carbon dioxide. Air moves between the atmosphere and the lungs in response to a pressure gradient. Air moves into the lungs when pressure in the atmosphere is higher than pressure in the lungs, and air moves out of the lungs when pressure in the lungs is greater than the pressure in the atmosphere. So pressure changes in the lungs are created by changes in the volume of the thoracic cavity. Inspiration, also called inhalation, is the process where air moves into the lungs when the thoracic cavity increases in volume due to the contraction of the diaphragm in the intercostal muscles. These intercostal muscles lie between the ribs so that when they contract, they pull the rib cage upward and outward. Raising the ribs increase the thoracic cavity. It lengthens the thoracic cavity because the diaphragm is dome shaped at this point. It becomes flattened. So air rushes in because pressure in the lungs is less than pressure in the atmosphere. This is an active process involving muscle contraction. Exhalation, also called expiration, occurs when air moves out of the lungs when the diaphragm and intercostal muscles relax and the thoracic cavity decreases in volume. So air moves out of the lungs because pressure in the lungs is greater than pressure in the atmosphere. It's typically a passive process without muscle contraction. Tidal volume is the term given for the volume of air inhaled or exhaled during a normal breath. Inspiratory reserve volume is the amount of air that can be inhaled in addition to a normal breath. It's approximately 4 to 7 times more than normal breathing. Its decreases in reserves are characteristic in bronchitis and asthma. Firefighters at the World Trade Center had significant loss of expiratory reserve within the first few years, equal to about 12 years of age, and due to the toxic dust that they inhaled. Expiratory reserve volume is the volume of air that can be exhaled in addition to a normal breath. Air volume movement varies between individuals based on sex, age, height, and of course health. Vital capacity is the term given to the maximum volume of air that can be inhaled in a single forced breath. So it would include the tidal volume, which is the normal volume of air during a normal breath, plus the inspiratory reserve, such as how much more you can inhale, plus expiratory reserve volume, which is how much more you can exhale. This is such as like if you were going to have someone blow out the candles on a birthday cake. Of course, they're in a normal breath, and then they're going to inhale, and then they're going to exhale. That's what vital capacity is. Residual volume is the volume of air remaining in the lungs after maximum exhalation. The lungs can never be completely emptied of air. Total lung capacity is the total volume of air in lungs after the maximum inhalation, which would be the vital capacity plus the residual volume. This is just a graph that shows those movements of air. The tidal volume is just the ordinary breath. The inspiratory reserve is how much more we can forcibly inhale. The expiratory reserve is how much we can force exhalation. And so all of that equals vital capacity. The residual volume is just the amount of air remaining in the lungs, which we can never totally empty. And so the total lung capacity would be measured in all those factors. Just a review of the three processes. The external respiration, it occurs in the alveoli of the lungs. Oxygen will diffuse into the blood, and carbon dioxide will diffuse out from the blood. Gas transport by the blood. Oxygen is going to be bound to hemoglobin. Carbon dioxide is going to be primarily in the plasma. Internal respiration occurs in tissues, wherein oxygen diffuses out of the blood and into cells, and carbon dioxide diffuses out of the cells and into blood. And so this just walks us through the processes of the alveoli. This is where the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide is going to occur in the lungs. The internal respiration is the exchange of gases, carbon dioxide in the capillary beds. And external respiration is going to be that gas exchange in the lungs. Most oxygen is carried in the blood is bound to hemoglobin, the protein in red blood cells. Oxyhemoglobin is the term given to the molecule when hemoglobin is bound to oxygen. Carbon dioxide is removed by the blood in one of three ways. Either dissolved in the plasma, which accounts for about 7 to 10%, carried by hemoglobin, approximately 20%, but about 70% is carried as a bicarbonate ion dissolved in the plasma. Bicarbonate ions are an important part of the body's acid-base buffering system. The pH of blood should maintain around 7.45. Even movement to lower acidity of 7.35 or up to 7.6 can result in death. So maintaining the acidity, the balance within the blood is very important. When carbon dioxide in water, it forms carbonic acid, and carbonic acid dissociates to form hydrogen and bicarbonate ions. This occurs 100 times faster in red blood cells than plasma, because red blood cells contain an enzyme called carbonic anhydrase that plasma does not. Carbonic anhydrase speeds up the transfer of carbon dioxide to carbonic acid, which is then converted to the bicarbonate ion and hydrogen ion. Hydrogen ions typically combine with hemoglobin, allowing hemoglobin to also act as a buffer. In the lungs, the process will be reversed. So carbonic anhydrase is an important enzyme found in red blood cells that allow this acidity of blood, when this carbon dioxide diffuses into it, to be tolerable to the body. The basic breathing rhythm is controlled by the breathing center located in the medulla oblongata. The passive within the breathing center is both an inspiratory area and expiratory area. The pattern of breathing, of course, can be voluntarily altered through impulses originating in the cerebral cortex, which is our conscious area. During quiet breathing, inspiratory neurons are active. Impulses stimulate the diaphragm and intercostal muscles. After about 2 seconds of activity of the inspiratory neurons cease for a few seconds, in which the diaphragm and intercostal muscles relax and exhaling occurs. During heavy breathing, the expiratory center facilitates contraction of other intercostal muscles and abdominal muscles. Carbon dioxide is the most important chemical influencing breathing rate. There are chemoreceptors located in the medulla oblongata, the aortic body, as well as the carotid bodies. Increased carbon dioxide prompts increased breathing rate to reduce the acidity and maintain the pH of the blood. This just shows a chart of where the increased blood level of carbon dioxide increases the acidity because of the increased hydrogen ions. So there is increased carbon dioxide acidity level is also increased in the cerebrospinal fluid. So these are sensed by the chemoreceptors in the medulla oblongata from the cerebrospinal fluid, and sensed from the blood by the peripheral chemoreceptors in the aortic and carotid bodies. The aorta on top of the heart and the carotid arteries running alongside the neck. These stimulate the breathing control center in the medulla. Breathing rate is going to increase, more carbon dioxide is going to be exhaled, and returns the carbon dioxide level to normal. Pardon me. Oxygen does not influence a breathing rate unless its blood levels fall dangerously slow. Kind of initiates a last call to the medulla to increase the breathing rate. If oxygen levels fail to rise, the neurons in the inspiratory area die and don't respond to impulses from chemoreceptors due to the inspiratory area of the medulla not sending impulses to the diaphragm and intercostal muscles, and breathing rate decreases or ceases. Oxygen also has chemoreceptors located in the medulla, the aortic bodies, as well as the carotid bodies.